In this video, I'll show you how to make this custom clock, including the design, making the metal parts, assembly, and creating the clock for shipping. We have a customer that wants to make a clock that is like this, but it has hearts instead of the actual Michigan shapes. So the way we start that is we create a pencil drawing, and then we'll take that pencil drawing and we'll scan it into the computer and create a line drawing version of it. And this is proof basically that gets sent out to the customer before any metal gets cut. And so once the proof is approved and no changes are needed, then we go ahead and cut metal. Basically we can cut all kinds of different kinds of metal. In this particular custom clock, we're going to make another clock that's made out of steel, like the last one that you were just looking at there. Here is an example of one of the clocks. This is a custom job made out of stainless steel, so this would not rust. And also, we can make the main part out of real copper. Most of the time when I make clocks that say copper in the description, it's a copper patina with clear coat. So this type of a clock will of course cost more than one of my normal ones. I can make custom clock faces in many styles and for any state or country. The next thing we do is we take the proof and we create a cut path for the plasma cutting machine based upon the design that's approved by the customer. I use a PlasmaCam plasma cutter to make my custom metal parts. It comes with a Design Edge software package. There are a lot of options, and there is a complete DVD tutorial system. The first step is to import the pencil sketch. Then the next step is to take that pencil sketch and clean it up. The third step is to smooth all the rough edges in the design. The fourth step is to create a cut path. Cut path is needed because the plasma beam is not zero thickness, so you need to offset by half the width of the plasma beam so that you'll cut accurately to the edge of the drawing that you made. That's all there is. The machine follows the cut path shown in red and jumps from one cut path to the next shown in yellow. Okay, so then we go and we cut some metal. Here's the actual video of this particular large clock being cut. This is what a 22-inch clock looks like size-wise compared to the 18-inch clock, which would be like this. Or a 9-inch clock, which would be like this. Now, one of the problems with the bigger you cut the metal, or the bigger you cut the clock, is that there's a higher possibility of losing a lot of material. due to a cutting error of some sort. Now if you look over here, that's exactly what happened on this design. Unfortunately, the machine decided at a very bad time to have some sort of a processing error. So anyway, here is what is supposed to look like when it comes out and it's cut out and there aren't any cutting errors. I take an angle grinder and I clean all of the slag and other defects off of here, and then I just sand the surface and remove any burrs. Somebody else probably has a better way of doing it, but that's how I do it. And then I will paint this black. Okay, so here's what it looks like again from the front side. Of course, for this particular style of clock that I'm making, which is this particular type of clock, which has this gold patina pattern on it, what I'll do is part of the process of making this requires this gray manufacturing oxidation to be there. So and there are a few little rust spots like that. Well, those get cleaned up and you don't really actually see them, but then basically I do my thing, which is my own process. So what we'll do is basically finish that to look like that other little clock, and by the magic powers of nerd, now that the magic of the metal work is all done, the next thing is to put the clock together. These are 3 different types of clock mechanisms. This one is a Seiko SKP, which is supposed to be higher quality. If you were to buy one of these, it won't say Seiko on it, it'll just say SKP, but it's Seiko. SKP is a Seiko brand name. This is a Quantex, kind of a low budget, but this is what you would use most of the time, just because you can't put these real expensive ones in all of the smaller clocks. You wouldn't be able to make any money off of selling them at all. But if you're making your own clock and you want it to have a higher quality, this is an option. This is basically a Quantex that has a longer shaft on it so that you can use it with wood or some other thick material. They also make these with what they call high torque movements. All of these are quartz. The high torque movements are going to be needed if you have a really big clock that has hands that are too heavy for one of these smaller ones to be able to move. Otherwise, they look exactly the same. This 22-inch clock doesn't need to have a high torque movement, so we're going to be using this Seiko normal clock movement to give it a high quality. So the next thing to do here is we're going to start building the clock, and we don't need these guys. What we're going to need though is we're going to need this, which is a custom mounting bracket that I make that goes specific to this 22-inch clock, and these are the clock hands. We don't really want to take a risk of scratching anything up while we're putting things together, so I always put down a soft cloth to make sure we don't scratch up anything. And of course these are the little fiddly bits that you need. One thing I forgot to mention is that these standard type clock movements, you can also buy these. Some of them might come with it, but this is just a metal hanger For my clocks, I always put these metal hangers on. They just work better with the weight of the steel. But they do have these little notch in there if you wanted to use that. And the other thing is that my clocks of this particular style all have a location screw that ties the pieces together so that they're in the correct orientation. The advantage of the socket is I do not want to scratch up any of the area around the clock movement while I'm trying to tighten that screw. You can still loosen that nut and be able to adjust this if there's still a problem with the center of gravity. Okay. Then we put the clock hands on. The first thing that I do when I put clock hands on is I put the minute hand on, and then I adjust the minute hand so that it's pointing at the 12 o'clock position, and then I put the hour hand on and adjust the, make sure that it's straight. Then we put the minute hand on. Then you just kind of bend these down carefully a little bit to make sure that the minute hand and hour hand aren't going to be touching each other. And then the second hand just pushes down into the center of the clock mechanism. Then you put a battery on. Okay, always make sure you put the battery in correctly. So you got a plus and a minus, and your battery's got a plus and a minus. Then we basically just let the clock run for a sufficient amount of time to test it, usually at least a half an hour. All of the clocks that I make come double boxed, and this is the inner box, and this is a mounting bracket that goes inside the box to make sure that the clock is secured and nothing can touch the clock face. When the clock is put in, it's slipped in underneath of this thing, and then a zip tie ties the clock movement. So when you get the clock, you would have to probably remove this from the box, and then you can cut the zip tie, which would be underneath of the clock. This is 1/4 inch plywood with a custom made metal bracket that's similar to the other one. The clock movement will slide in under here, but there's no zip tie tying it in. The zip ties, it'll have two zip ties that tie onto these points here. And then, so you got plywood there. Nothing can touch the top of the clock, the face of the clock with hands. You've got these support brackets or cubes in the corner, and then the plywood top goes on it, and all of this goes inside of a larger cardboard box with some padding. That's all for today, folks. I hope you really like this video on making a custom metal art clock. For more custom metal art, please check out my company Facebook page. Thanks a lot and have a great day.